Have you ever been in a room full of people laughing, talking, surrounded by faces and voices, and yet felt a loneliness so deep it made your chest ache? Not the peaceful solitude of being alone in your room, but a suffocating emptiness that only seems to grow stronger the more people are around you. You look around and everyone seems connected, everyone seems to belong, while you're standing there like a ghost in your own, present but not really there. And the worst part, you can't explain it. You can't tell anyone, because how do you say, I feel more alone with you than without you, without sounding ungrateful or broken? But what if I told you this isn't a flaw in you? What if this crushing loneliness in company is actually your soul screaming something urgent, something most people are too distracted to hear? The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, a man who understood isolation and authenticity better than almost anyone, discovered why this happens. And what he revealed will completely change how you see every relationship, every social gathering, every moment you've spent pretending to be fine when inside you were drowning. Today, we're going deeper than surface friendships and polite conversations. We're descending into the existential truth that Kierkegaard spent his entire life exploring. The difference between being with people and truly being seen. Because there's a type of loneliness that only exists in company, a loneliness more painful than any physical isolation. And once you understand why it happens, you'll never look at human connection the same way again. This isn't about being antisocial or hating people. This is about something far more profound. It's about the terrifying realization that you can be completely surrounded and still feel like you're screaming into a void where no one hears you, no one sees you, no one knows the real you exists at all. Kierkegaard called this the sickness unto death, a spiritual loneliness that eats you alive from the inside while you smile on the outside. And if this is already stirring something deep inside you, if you're recognizing yourself in these words, then you need to know. This channel exists for people who refuse to live on the surface. We don't do small talk here. We do soul talk. So subscribe now, not for more videos, but because you're finally ready to understand the loneliness that no one else will name. This is where the real conversation begins. Listen closely now, because Kierkegaard said something that cuts to the bone. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. Read that again. Let it sink in. Not being who you are. And the brutal truth, when you're with people, truly with people in the way society expects, you're almost always not being who you are. You're acting a role. You're adjusting. You're filtering every word, every expression, every piece of yourself through the question, is this acceptable? That's why you feel more alone in company, because the person they're talking to, laughing with, sitting next to, isn't actually you. It's a version of you, a carefully edited, socially acceptable, won't make anyone uncomfortable version. And your real self, the one with raw thoughts and uncomfortable truths and feelings that don't fit neatly into small talk, that self is locked away, watching from behind your eyes, more isolated than ever. When you're physically alone, you don't have to wear the costume. The facade can come off. You can be messy, contradictory, intense, quiet, weird, sad, or ecstatic, without filtering it through someone else's comfort. There's a relief in that, an honesty. Your aloneness is at least authentic. But when you're with people and still hiding behind a character, you're experiencing a double loneliness. You're alone, and you're lying about it. Now write these words in the comments. Don't just read them. Write them. I will no longer abandon myself for belonging. Type it out. Make it real. Let that declaration echo in your bones. Say it like you mean it, because your soul has been waiting to hear you choose yourself. What changes everything is understanding that there are actually 3 distinct forces at work when you feel this crushing loneliness in company. 3 layers of disconnection that Kierkegaard spent his life unraveling. And once you see them clearly, you can't unsee them. First insight: the double disconnection that suffocates your soul. Think about the last time you were at a social event. How much of what you said was true? How much was strategic? How many times did you swallow your real response and offer the expected one instead? Each time you do that, you betray yourself, and your soul feels it. But it's not just one betrayal. It's 2 simultaneous betrayals happening at once. The first: you're disconnected from the people around you because you're not showing them your real self. You're showing them an edited version, a palatable version. So every conversation is a translation, and like all translations, something essential gets lost. The real you remains untranslated, unseen, unknown. The second betrayal: you're disconnected from yourself because you're inhabiting a false identity. You've split yourself in 2, the real you watching from behind your eyes, and the performed you speaking the acceptable words. This split is exhausting. It's like being an actor who never gets to leave the stage, who never gets to take off the costume and remember who they are beneath the character. And when these 2 betrayals happen simultaneously, when you're cut off from genuine human connection and cut off from your own soul at the same time, the loneliness becomes unbearable. It's not just I'm alone. It's I'm alone and I'm lying about it, and everyone believes the lie, and the real me is suffocating behind this facade, and no one even knows I'm dying in here. That's why being with people can feel worse than being alone. Because at least when you're truly alone, only one of those disconnections exists. You're not with other people, true, but you're with yourself, fully, honestly, without pretense. And that singular connection, that reuniting with your own essence, is so much more nourishing than being surrounded by people while wearing a false face. Second insight: what Kierkegaard discovered about the crowd and why it's killing your soul. Kierkegaard wrote something that should terrify everyone. The crowd is untruth. Not the crowd can be untruthful. No, the crowd is untruth by its very nature. Because when people gather as a crowd, they abandon their individual truth for collective comfort. They become less themselves and more like each other. They speak in clichés. They avoid depth. They stay on the surface where it's safe. And if you're someone who can't do that, if your soul refuses to stay shallow, then every crowd becomes a reminder that you don't belong. Not because you're defective, but because you're awake. And awake, people feel desperately alone among those who are sleepwalking through life. The crowd doesn't reward authenticity. It rewards conformity. It rewards people who can smooth their edges, who can make others comfortable, who can fit into the predetermined boxes of acceptable behavior. So the more authentic you are, the more alone you feel. Because authentic people don't fit. They disturb. They question. They refuse to fake it. Society tells you to be yourself, but what it really means is, be the version of yourself that makes us comfortable. Be authentic, but not too authentic. Be unique, but not so unique that you can't be categorized. The contradiction is built into the system. And if you actually try to be yourself, fully yourself, you'll discover very quickly that society lied. The twist? The longer you play the game, the harder it becomes to stop. Because everyone around you has invested in your character. They like the role you've been playing, and when you try to drop the act, they don't recognize you. They don't like it. They push back. They want the costume back on. But consider this. What if that pressure, that discomfort, that sense of not belonging, what if that's not the problem? What if it's the solution? What if your soul is using that uncomfortable feeling to tell you something crucial? This isn't your place. These aren't your people. This version of you isn't real. Come back to me. The loneliness in crowds isn't evidence that you're broke. It's evidence that you're awake. It's your inner compass pointing you home to yourself. Third insight, the leap of faith that changes everything. Kierkegaard's leap of faith wasn't just about religious belief. It was about the courage it takes to be yourself in a world that rewards conformity. To choose authenticity when pretending is easier. To feel the loneliness of being real and choose it anyway over the false comfort of fitting in. This leap is terrifying because when you stop acting, you lose things. You lose friends who only liked your facade. You lose invitations to spaces that require you to be small. The loneliness actually gets worse before it gets better. Because now you're not just alone in crowds, you're often actually alone, physically isolated, because you've stopped playing the game. But what happens on the other side of that leap changes everything. You start attracting different people, not more people. Different people. People who are also done faking it. People who can handle your depth because they have their own. These connections are rare. They might be few, but they're real. And one real connection is worth 1,000 shallow ones. Kierkegaard knew this. He broke off his engagement to Regine Olsen, not because he didn't love her, but because being with her would require him to be someone he wasn't. He chose the agony of loneliness over the agony of self-betrayal. And that choice allowed him to write truths that still shake people awake 2 centuries later. You have to make the same choice. Will you keep hiding to avoid loneliness? Or will you risk being alone to remain authentic? Because you can't have both. You can't be truly yourself and also be universally accepted. Your soul and the crowd are fundamentally incompatible. What if the loneliness isn't the problem? What if it's the signal? Your soul using that uncomfortable feeling in crowds to tell you, this isn't authentic. These aren't real connections. Stop dying to fit in and start living on your own terms. When you understand this, everything shifts. You stop seeing the loneliness as evidence that you're defective. You start seeing it as evidence that you're evolving. You stop trying to fix your inability to enjoy shallow connection. You start honoring it as a sign of depth. The path forward isn't about finding the right people, though that can help. It's about becoming the right person, becoming authentic, becoming willing to be misunderstood. Because once you do that, once you stop hiding, you create a field of permission around you. You give others permission to be real too. And even if you never find those people, even if you walk this path mostly alone, you'll have something more valuable than a crowd of shallow connections. You'll have yourself, fully, honestly, without betrayal, and that reunion with your own soul, after years of abandoning it for belonging, is worth every lonely moment. So ask yourself this: how much longer will you sacrifice your authenticity for acceptance? How many more gatherings will you leave feeling emptier than when you arrived before you admit that the problem isn't you? It's the game itself. The truth cuts deeper than you've been willing to admit. Being misknown is worse than being unknown. When people think they know you, but they only know your character, you're trapped in a lie. They relate to a fiction. They love a ghost. And the real you watches from the shadows, dying a little more with every shallow conversation. But consider this: other people's comfort is not your responsibility. Their need for you to stay predictable, manageable, small, that's their issue, not yours. Your only responsibility is to your own soul, to your own truth, to your own authenticity. Better to be authentically alone than surrounded by people who only know your lies. There's a moment Kierkegaard describes where you suddenly see the game everyone is playing. You see the performances, the facades, the careful choreography of acceptable behavior. And once you see it, You can't unsee it. You become an outsider in your own life, aware that everyone is pretending and no one is admitting it. This moment is both liberation and curse. Liberation because you finally understand why you felt so alone. But curse because now you can't participate in the illusion the way you used to. Your awareness has exiled you from the crowd, and this exile, this is what Kierkegaard called becoming an individual, someone who has separated from the crowd and chosen to stand in their own truth, even if it means standing alone. Most people never make this separation. They stay in the crowd their whole lives, acting until they forget they're acting. But you, if you're feeling this loneliness in company, you're already halfway out. You're already aware. The question is, will you complete the journey? Will you choose full authenticity, even though it means accepting a different kind of loneliness? Kierkegaard chose truth. He chose to be misunderstood, lonely, isolated, because the alternative was to be false, comfortable, and dead inside. And that choice is why his words still matter. Why they're reaching across centuries to touch something real in you right now. Because truth recognizes truth. And somewhere in you, beneath all the acts and all the facades, there's a true self that's been waiting to be lived. That self feels the loneliness in crowds because it knows this isn't real connection. This is theater. And it's tired of playing the role. You're here, reading these words, feeling this resonance, because somewhere in you is that same refusal to fake it. That same knowing that loneliness in authenticity is more bearable than connection built on lies. You already know this. I'm just naming what you've felt but couldn't articulate. So let me say it clearly. The loneliness you feel with people is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a sign that you're outgrowing the game. You're outgrowing pretense. You're outgrowing shallow connection. That's your soul stretching beyond its old constraints. That's evolution. That's awakening. And yes, it hurts. Yes, you might lose people who can't handle the real you, but what you gain is yourself. Unfiltered. Alive. And that self, once you reclaim it, will be your greatest companion. You'll never feel that crushing loneliness in company again, because you'll never again be in company while pretending to be someone you're not. If you're choosing truth, if you're choosing to be an individual in Kierkegaard's sense, then subscribe to this channel now. Not because I need subscribers, but because you need community. You need to know you're not alone in this choice. There are others walking this path, feeling this same sacred loneliness, refusing to fake it. This is where we gather. Those of us who can't do shallow anymore, who understand that the loneliness in company is worse than any solitude. Subscribe because you're finally ready to stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what's wrong with a world that requires me to betray myself to belong? That's the right question. And once you ask it, everything changes. The loneliness you feel with people is real, but it's not forever. It's a transition. It's the space between who you were pretending to be and who you're brave enough to become. Cross that space, step into your truth. And on the other side, you'll find the relief of being yourself. Not accepted by everyone, not liked by all, but seen by the ones who matter, including and especially yourself. This is your map. You're holding it now. Trust that the loneliness you feel in company is not the destination. It's the compass pointing you home to yourself. And that home, that authentic existence, that's where you've been trying to go all along. Your real life is waiting on the other side of this act. Go live it.